My name is Joy, and I'm a senior systems architect at TechFlow Solutions. I was leading a critical client presentation on our company-wide video call presenting the final phase of our $25 million government contract renewal. That's when Bradley Hartman, the VP's arrogant son and newly appointed innovation director, interrupted me mid-sentence. He smirked directly at the camera, declared, "She's replaceable," and muted my microphone while I was explaining crucial technical specifications. The entire executive team watched in complete silence. I stayed calm, reached for my resignation letter and employee badge, then raised them into camera view. No words needed. The silence stretched across that video call like a frozen lake about to crack. I could see every face in those little squares on my screen, each executive processing what they'd just witnessed. But let me back up and explain how we got to this moment, because the real story started 3 years ago when I first walked through TechFlow's doors. I joined TechFlow Solutions after my previous startup collapsed during the dot-com aftermath. The company was struggling with basic cybersecurity infrastructure, losing clients because their systems couldn't meet federal compliance standards. They hired me specifically to solve this problem, and I threw myself into the work with everything I had. Within 6 months, I had completely redesigned their security architecture from the ground up. I built custom encryption protocols that went beyond industry standards, creating a proprietary quantum-resistant system that could handle classified government data. The work was so complex and cutting-edge that I kept certain critical components in my head for security reasons. No documentation existed for the core algorithms I had developed, the specific implementation sequences, or the emergency override procedures that only I knew. This wasn't arrogance or poor planning. In cybersecurity, especially when dealing with government contracts, you create multiple layers of protection. Having undocumented knowledge held by a trusted architect is actually a standard security practice. If someone wanted to compromise the system, they would need both the documented specifications and my personal knowledge to succeed. The Department of Defense noticed our capabilities during a routine security audit 18 months ago. Dr. Sarah Williams, their chief technology liaison, was so impressed with our quantum encryption implementation that she recommended us for their next major contract cycle. We competed against 7 other firms, including some massive defense contractors with decades of experience. We won because of the technical superiority of my security design. The contract explicitly named me as the lead architect responsible for maintaining system integrity throughout the 5-year agreement period. This wasn't unusual for specialized technical roles in government work, but it meant I was personally bonded to the project's success. That victory transformed TechFlow from a struggling mid-tier company into a major player in government cybersecurity. Our revenue tripled. We hired 40 new employees. Founder Robert Hartman started getting invited to industry conferences and federal advisory panels. And that's when everything began to change. 6 months ago, Bradley Hartman joined our company as innovation director. Fresh from Harvard Business School with an MBA but zero technical background, he was Robert's only son and clearly being groomed for leadership. 28 years old, confident to the point of arrogance, and absolutely convinced that his business education trumped everyone else's practical experience. From day one, Bradley made it clear he thought my methods were outdated. He used buzzwords like agile methodology and disruptive innovation, while proposing changes that would fundamentally compromise our security architecture. During team meetings, he would interrupt my technical explanations to suggest we adopt more scalable solutions that he'd read about in business journals. The problem wasn't just his ignorance. The real issue was that Robert Hartman, desperate to prepare his son for eventual company leadership, gave Bradley authority he hadn't earned. Suddenly, I found myself having to justify basic security decisions to someone who didn't understand the difference between encryption and encoding. But I persevered because I believed in the work. Our system was protecting genuinely important information. The algorithms I developed were being studied by cybersecurity researchers at major universities. Dr. Williams had hinted that our success with this contract could lead to even more significant projects with other federal agencies. I thought competence would speak for itself. I thought results would matter more than family connections. I was naive. The climactic revelation that hit me like a freight train came during a routine system review meeting 3 weeks ago. Bradley was presenting what he called optimization recommendations to the executive team, and I watched in horror as he displayed slides showing my proprietary security innovations as his own work. He had taken my quantum encryption protocols, simplified them into basic flowcharts that completely missed their technical sophistication, and was claiming credit for developing them. Worse, he was suggesting modifications that would introduce fatal vulnerabilities into our government systems. He wanted to replace my custom algorithms with off-the-shelf software to reduce complexity and maintenance costs. When I tried to object, Bradley smiled condescendingly and said, "Joy, I appreciate your attachment to these legacy systems, but we need to think bigger picture here. Sometimes you have to disrupt your own success to reach the next level." Legacy systems, he called the most advanced cybersecurity infrastructure in our industry legacy systems. That night, I realized Bradley wasn't just incompetent, he was dangerous. His proposed changes would compromise national security, violate our federal contracts, and destroy everything I'd built. And because of his family connection, nobody would stop him. That's when I knew I had to act. The real war started the next morning. Bradley launched what I can only describe as a systematic campaign to undermine my credibility and push me out of the company. Looking back, I should have seen it coming, but I was so focused on the technical work that I missed the political maneuvering happening around me. His first move was scheduling critical team meetings during my planned vacation time. I had requested 2 weeks off to visit my sister in Colorado, time I'd cleared with my direct supervisor months in advance. The day before my departure, Bradley sent company-wide calendar invites for urgent strategy sessions that coincidentally overlapped with my entire vacation period. When I tried to explain the conflict, Bradley responded with mock concern. "Oh, Joy's vacation is more important than our government deadlines. I guess we'll have to make these crucial decisions without our lead architect." He said this in front of our entire technical staff, making it sound like I was prioritizing personal time over national security. I canceled my vacation. The meetings turned out to be presentations where Bradley introduced his business school classmates as consulting experts who would help us modernize our approach. These consultants, none of whom had government security clearances or cybersecurity experience, spent 3 days telling us how Silicon Valley startups were revolutionizing the industry with cloud-based solutions and open-source frameworks. Everything they suggested would have violated federal security protocols. When I pointed this out, Bradley smiled his practiced MBA smile and said, "Joy, you're being defensive about your legacy work. These consultants have perspective you lack because you've been too close to the technical details. Sometimes you need fresh eyes to see innovation opportunities." Fresh eyes. As if 20 years of cybersecurity experience was somehow a liability. His next tactic was more subtle but equally destructive. Bradley began reassigning my team members to his pet projects, claiming he needed their expertise for high-priority initiatives. My encryption specialist, Lisa Chen, was moved to a mobile app development project. My network security expert, James Rodriguez, was reassigned to work on Bradley's proposed customer portal upgrade. Within 2 weeks, I went from leading a team of 8 specialists to working essentially alone on our most complex government systems. When I complained to Robert Hartman about being understaffed, Bradley had already prepared his narrative. "Joy seems to be struggling with delegation," he told his father during a management meeting I wasn't invited to. "She's very territorial about her work and resistant to collaborative approaches. I've tried to provide additional resources, but she prefers working in isolation." I found out about this conversation through Lisa Chen, who overheard it while delivering project files to Robert's office. She was as outraged as I was, but what could we do? Bradley was family. I was just an employee. The systematic isolation continued for weeks. Bradley would schedule team updates without including me, then criticize my lack of participation in project coordination. He created new reporting structures that bypassed my authority, telling team members they should feel free to bring ideas directly to leadership instead of getting stuck in technical bottlenecks. The technical bottlenecks he was referring to were security protocols required by federal law, but the real betrayal came when I discovered what Bradley had been doing with my innovations. Through a colleague at a competing firm, I learned that Bradley had been presenting my quantum encryption work to potential investors as his own breakthrough research. He had created a slick presentation deck titled Next Generation Cybersecurity Solutions by Bradley Hartman that featured simplified diagrams of my algorithms, complete with his name as the lead developer. He was shopping these presentations to venture capital firms, claiming he had developed proprietary technology that could revolutionize government cybersecurity contracts. The presentations were technically illiterate. He described complex mathematical concepts using business buzzwords that made no sense to anyone with actual cybersecurity knowledge. He claimed his innovations could scale exponentially and disrupt traditional encryption paradigms while showing flowcharts that completely misrepresented how the algorithms actually worked. But venture capitalists aren't cybersecurity experts. They saw impressive-looking technical diagrams branded with the Hartman family name and assumed they were looking at genuine innovation. Bradley was leveraging my work to build his personal reputation as a tech visionary. Meanwhile, he was telling anyone who would listen that I was resistant to new leadership and territorially guarding outdated systems. He convinced his father that my insistence on following federal security protocols was actually stubbornness and fear of change. "Joy's been here too long," he said during one executive meeting. "She's comfortable with her position and doesn't want to adapt to modern business practices. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions about personnel who can't grow with the company." I was building a detailed file documenting Bradley's incompetence, his violations of intellectual property protocols, and his dangerous suggestions for compromising our security systems. But every time I tried to present this evidence to Robert Hartman, Bradley would schedule conflicting priorities or create urgent crises that demanded immediate attention. He was systematically destroying my credibility while positioning himself as the innovative leader who would modernize TechFlow for the future. And because he was the founder's son, nobody wanted to challenge his authority directly. The humiliation campaign reached its peak during our monthly all-hands meeting 2 weeks ago. Bradley had convinced his father to let him present the company's strategic vision for the next quarter. I assumed this would be typical business school nonsense about synergy and optimization. Instead, Bradley presented a detailed plan for transitioning away from legacy security architectures and implementing cutting-edge solutions that would position TechFlow as an industry leader. He was essentially proposing to dismantle everything I had built and replace it with fundamentally flawed alternatives. When I raised my hand to ask about federal compliance requirements, Bradley dismissed me with a wave. "Joy, these are strategic business decisions, not technical implementation details. We can figure out the operational aspects after we commit to the vision." Operational aspects. He was calling national security protocols operational aspects. That's when I realized Bradley wasn't just trying to claim credit for my work. He was actively trying to destroy it so he could rebuild TechFlow according to his own incompetent vision. And once my systems were dismantled, there would be no evidence of what I had actually accomplished. Today's video call was supposed to be a routine presentation to our government clients about contract renewal timelines. I had prepared technical updates showing how our security metrics had exceeded all federal requirements and discussing plans for expanding our capabilities over the next fiscal year. Bradley saw it as his opportunity to establish dominance in front of our most important clients. He wanted to humiliate me publicly on a recorded call with federal officials to demonstrate that he was now the decision-maker at TechFlow Solutions. He wanted to show everyone that Joy the architect was replaceable, while Bradley the visionary was indispensable. He succeeded in humiliating me, but he had no idea what he had just unleashed. The video call screen showed 23 participants in their individual squares, and I could see the exact moment when reality began to dawn on each face. My resignation letter and security badge were clearly visible in the camera frame, and the silence stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Robert Hartman's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as he processed what my wordless gesture meant. Bradley, still smirking from his power play, hadn't yet grasped the catastrophic implications of what he'd just triggered. But Marcus Chen did. Marcus was TechFlow's corporate attorney, a meticulous man in his 50s who specialized in government contract law. I watched his face drain of color as he stared at my resignation display. His hand moved frantically across his desk, probably reaching for the printed contract documents that outlined our federal obligations. I could see him calculating the legal nightmare unfolding in real time. You see, government cybersecurity contracts aren't like regular business agreements. When you're dealing with classified systems and national security protocols, every aspect of personnel management becomes a federal compliance issue. The Department of Defense had explicit requirements about continuity of technical leadership knowledge, transfer procedures, and security clearance maintenance. My employment contract contained specific clauses that I'd insisted on during initial negotiations 3 years ago. As the lead architect for classified systems, my departure would trigger mandatory security reviews, audit procedures, and potentially void certain aspects of our federal agreements if not handled according to strict protocols. More critically, the government contract explicitly named me as the responsible technical authority for system integrity. This wasn't just a job title. It was a legal designation that made me personally accountable for maintaining cybersecurity standards throughout the contract period. You can't simply replace a designated technical authority without extensive vetting, security clearance transfers, and federal approval processes that take months to complete. Marcus knew all of this because he'd helped negotiate those clauses. He'd understood their importance for protecting TechFlow's interests, ensuring we couldn't lose critical personnel without adequate preparation time. Now, those same protective clauses were becoming weapons of mass destruction aimed at the company's future. I watched Marcus lean urgently toward Robert Hartman's camera position, his lips moving rapidly in what was clearly a frantic explanation of the legal catastrophe unfolding. Robert's face went from confused to pale to something approaching panic as he began to understand the scope of the problem. The $25 million contract renewal wasn't just at risk. Our failure to maintain technical continuity could result in breach of contract penalties, loss of security clearances, potential criminal liability for failing to protect classified information, and complete exclusion from future government work. Bradley, meanwhile, was still basking in his moment of triumph. He'd successfully humiliated the stubborn employee who had been resisting his authority. He probably thought this was exactly the kind of decisive leadership that would impress the government clients and demonstrate his readiness to take over the company. He had no idea he'd just destroyed everything his father had built. Dr. Sarah Williams, the Department of Defense liaison who'd been observing our presentation, broke the silence with a carefully measured question. Robert, I need to understand the implications of what we're witnessing here. Joy is listed as the primary technical authority on our cybersecurity protocols. Her departure would trigger immediate compliance reviews according to Section 12 of our security agreement. Her voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear the underlying concern. Dr. Williams understood cybersecurity systems well enough to know that personnel changes at my level weren't simple administrative adjustments. She was already thinking about the security vulnerabilities, the knowledge transfer requirements, and the potential need to suspend or modify our contract arrangements. Robert Hartman tried to respond, but his voice cracked slightly. Dr. Williams, I'm sure we can address any transition concerns. This is just a personnel matter that we'll resolve internally. Robert, Dr. Williams replied, her tone becoming more formal. This isn't a personnel matter when it involves our classified systems. Joy's security clearance is tied to specific technical responsibilities that can't be transferred without federal oversight. We'll need to schedule an emergency review to assess system vulnerabilities and continuity protocols. I could see the dominoes falling in real time. Emergency security reviews meant immediate audits of all our systems. Federal oversight meant government officials examining every aspect of our technical capabilities. System vulnerability assessments meant admitting that our cybersecurity infrastructure depended heavily on knowledge that was about to walk out the door. Bradley finally seemed to sense that something was wrong. His smirk faded as he looked around at the increasingly tense faces on the video call. He started to speak, probably planning to offer some smooth explanation that would minimize the situation. That's when Marcus Chen truly panicked. I watched the lawyer lean even closer to Robert's camera, his whispered words becoming visible as desperate gestures. He was pointing at documents, shaking his head emphatically, and making cutting motions with his hand that clearly meant stop talking immediately. Robert's complexion went from pale to gray. His eyes widened as Marcus apparently explained the full scope of their legal exposure. Contract violations, security breaches, federal penalties, criminal liability, complete destruction of their government business. The silence on the call became absolute. 23 video squares showing federal officials, company executives, and technical staff all waiting to see how TechFlow would handle the crisis that Bradley's arrogance had created. I continued holding my resignation letter and badge in clear view of the camera. No dramatic speeches, no angry accusations, just calm, professional documentation of my departure from a company that had decided I was replaceable. But I wasn't finished with my revelations. The real shock was still coming. Because while Marcus Chen was calculating the legal implications of losing their lead architect, he had no idea that I'd already solved the problem of where to take my expertise next. 3 weeks ago, after Bradley's latest attempt to discredit my work, I'd made a phone call that would transform this crisis from a catastrophe into a complete annihilation. I'd called David Park at CyberGuard Industries. The irony was perfect. While Bradley had been plotting to push me out of TechFlow, I'd been planning my own exit strategy. But unlike his amateur power plays, my approach had been methodical, strategic, and absolutely devastating. The silence stretched for another few seconds as everyone processed the implications of my wordless resignation. Then, I decided it was time to share the second piece of information that would complete TechFlow's destruction. I unmuted my microphone for the first time since Bradley had silenced me. Dr. Williams, I said in a calm, professional voice. I should mention that I've accepted a position as senior principal architect at CyberGuard Industries. My start date is Monday. The silence that followed was the sound of a $25 million empire collapsing. The reaction to my announcement was immediate and visceral. I watched Robert Hartman's face go through several stages of shock as the full implications hit him. Bradley looked confused, like he was trying to process words in a foreign language. But Marcus Chen understood instantly, and I could see him frantically shuffling through what looked like competitor analysis files. CyberGuard Industries wasn't just any cybersecurity firm. They were TechFlow's primary rival for government contracts, a company that had been trying to break into the federal market for 5 years without success. They had excellent technical capabilities, but lacked the specialized expertise and government relationships that TechFlow had built through my innovations. David Park had been pursuing me for 2 years, ever since my quantum encryption work started getting attention at industry conferences. He'd made increasingly attractive offers, higher salary, equity participation, complete technical autonomy, and unlimited research budgets. I'd always declined because I believed in TechFlow's mission and thought loyalty would be rewarded. Bradley's systematic campaign had changed that calculation entirely. 3 weeks ago, after watching Bradley present my innovations as his own work to potential investors, I'd finally called David back. The conversation was brief and professional. I explained that I might be interested in exploring new opportunities depending on how certain workplace situations developed. David's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Joy, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. Whatever TechFlow is paying you, I'll double it. Whatever resources you need, you'll have them. Whatever timeline works for you, we'll accommodate. The offer was extraordinary senior principal architect position with complete authority over cybersecurity research and development. Annual salary of $320,000 plus equity that could be worth millions if CyberGuard succeeded in winning major government contracts. Unlimited budget for hiring specialists and acquiring cutting-edge equipment. Most importantly, absolute protection from corporate politics and business school interference. But the truly devastating aspect of my transition wasn't the personal benefits. It was the strategic advantage I would bring to CyberGuard's government contract pursuits. During my 3 years at TechFlow, I'd built relationships with key decision-makers throughout federal cybersecurity agencies. Dr. Sarah Williams trusted my technical judgment and had specifically requested my involvement in future projects. Colonel Michael Thompson at the Department of Homeland Security had praised my work on critical infrastructure protection. Dr. Patricia Rodriguez at the National Security Agency had consulted me on encryption standards for classified communications. These weren't just professional relationships. They were endorsements from the most influential cybersecurity leaders in government. When federal agencies saw my name attached to a proposal, they knew they were looking at proven expertise rather than untested promises. Under federal contracting rules, I was legally allowed to bring this expertise and these relationships to any employer as long as I didn't violate specific intellectual property or trade secret agreements. I'd been careful to ensure that my most innovative work remained my personal intellectual property, with TechFlow licensing my patents rather than owning them outright. The government officials on our video call were beginning to understand these implications. Dr. Williams was the first to speak, her voice carefully neutral but clearly concerned. Joy, I need to understand how this transition might affect our current project timelines and security protocols. I'd prepared for this question. Dr. Williams, I'll honor my contractual obligations during a standard 2-week transition period. However, I should note that CyberGuard Industries has expressed strong interest in participating in upcoming federal cybersecurity initiatives. Translation: your most experienced technical partner is joining your vendor pool, and she'll be competing directly against her former employer for future contracts. Bradley finally found his voice, though his confidence had evaporated completely. Joy, this seems like a hasty decision. Maybe we should discuss this privately before making any announcements to clients. I looked directly into the camera, meeting his gaze through the screen. Bradley, you made it clear that I'm replaceable. I'm simply accepting your assessment and finding an environment where my contributions will be valued appropriately. The word replaceable hung in the digital air like a toxic cloud. Every person on that call had heard Bradley use that exact term to dismiss me, and now they were watching the consequences unfold in real time. Robert Hartman attempted damage control, his voice strained with barely contained panic. Joy, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. You're absolutely not replaceable. You're a valued member of our team, and I'm sure we can work through any concerns you might have. Too little, too late. I'd already signed my employment agreement with CyberGuard Industries. The transition was legally complete regardless of any counteroffer TechFlow might attempt, but the real revelation was still coming. I'd saved the most devastating piece of information for last. Robert, I continued, I should also mention that David Park has already reached out to several of our government liaison contacts. They've expressed considerable enthusiasm about potentially working with me in my new capacity at CyberGuard. This was the nuclear option. In government, contracting relationships and trust are everything. Federal agencies work with specific individuals they've come to rely on, not just with companies. When a trusted technical expert moves to a competitor, their government contacts often follow. Dr. Williams, Colonel Thompson de Rodriguez, and 6 other federal cybersecurity leaders had already indicated their interest in exploring projects with CyberGuard Industries once I joined their team. These weren't formal commitments, but they were expressions of confidence that would carry enormous weight in future contract competitions. Marcus Chen was now frantically typing on his laptop, probably calculating the potential revenue impact of losing not just one major contract, but potentially being excluded from multiple future opportunities. The math was staggering. TechFlow could lose access to hundreds of millions of dollars in federal cybersecurity work over the next 5 years. Bradley, still not grasping the full scope of the disaster, made one final attempt to assert control. I understand you're upset about the presentation feedback, but leaving the company won't solve anything. We need to focus on professional development rather than running away from challenges. Professional development, presentation feedback, running away from challenges. He was still completely clueless about what he'd destroyed. I decided to provide one final clarification. Bradley, this isn't about feedback or professional development. You publicly declared me replaceable in front of our most important clients. I'm simply testing that hypothesis. If I'm truly replaceable, then my departure shouldn't affect your ability to maintain our government contracts. I paused to let that sink in. However, if my departure does create problems, then perhaps your assessment was incorrect. The silence that followed contained the sound of an empire crumbling. 23 video squares showing federal officials, corporate executives, and technical staff, all contemplating the same question: could TechFlow possibly replace Joy's expertise and government relationships in time to save their federal contracts? The answer was becoming increasingly clear, and I wasn't finished destroying them yet. What happened next was like watching a carefully orchestrated disaster unfold in slow motion. Robert Hartman's desperation became palpable as he realized the full scope of what Bradley's arrogance had cost them. His voice took on the strained quality of someone trying to maintain composure while their world collapsed. "Joy," he began, his tone shifting to something approaching pleading. "I think we need to pause this call and discuss the situation privately. There might be room for negotiating a better arrangement that addresses your concerns." I could see the panic behind his eyes. Robert knew that losing me meant losing everything he'd built over the past 3 years. TechFlow would revert from a major government contractor back to a struggling mid-tier firm, except now they'd have massive overhead costs and federal contract obligations they couldn't fulfill. But Bradley, in his infinite wisdom, chose that moment to double down on his incompetence. "Dad," he interrupted, his voice still carrying traces of his earlier confidence. "We don't need to panic here. Joy's technical contributions can absolutely be replaced with the right team structure and modern development approaches. I've already identified several candidates who could step into leadership roles." I watched 23 faces register various levels of disbelief at Bradley's continued cluelessness. Dr. Williams actually raised her eyebrows, an expression of professional incredulity that spoke volumes about how federal officials viewed his technical understanding. Marcus Chen looked like he was having a heart attack. "Bradley," Robert said sharply, "perhaps you should let me handle this discussion." But Bradley was on a roll, apparently believing that confident assertions could somehow override technical reality. "Dr. Williams, I want to assure you that TechFlow's cybersecurity capabilities are much broader than any single individual. We've been developing scalable solutions that don't depend on legacy knowledge bases." Legacy knowledge bases. He was describing my custom-designed quantum encryption algorithms as legacy knowledge bases. Dr. Williams responded with the kind of careful precision that government officials use when they're documenting statements for potential legal proceedings. "Bradley, can you be more specific about these scalable solutions? Our security protocols require detailed technical documentation and validation procedures." I knew exactly what she was doing. Dr. Williams understood cybersecurity systems well enough to recognize nonsense when she heard it. She was giving Bradley rope to hang himself with, creating a documented record of his technical incompetence for federal files. Bradley took the bait enthusiastically. Absolutely, Dr. Williams. We're implementing cutting edge artificial intelligence frameworks that can adapt dynamically to emerging threat patterns. Instead of relying on static encryption models, we're developing machine learning algorithms that evolve in real time to counter sophisticated attack vectors. The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley had just proposed replacing mathematically proven encryption protocols with experimental AI systems for protecting classified government data. He might as well have suggested using mood rings for national security. Dr. Williams' response was masterfully diplomatic. That's an interesting approach, Bradley. However, our security requirements mandate specific encryption standards that have been thoroughly tested and validated. Any proposed changes would need extensive federal review and approval processes. Translation: absolutely not. Never. Under no circumstances would we trust our classified information to your science fiction fantasies. I decided this was an appropriate moment to provide some technical context. Dr. Williams, the quantum encryption protocols currently protecting your classified systems took 18 months to develop and required collaboration with researchers at 3 major universities. The mathematical foundations involve elliptic curve cryptography integrated with post-quantum algorithms that can't be replicated through machine learning approaches. Bradley's face reddened slightly. Joy, you're being unnecessarily technical here. Modern solutions don't require that level of mathematical complexity. Actually, Bradley, I replied calmly, federal security standards explicitly require mathematical complexity that can't be compromised through computational attacks. The algorithms I developed are specifically designed to resist quantum computing threats that traditional encryption methods can't handle. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. That's correct. Quantum-resistant cryptography is becoming essential for long-term security planning. Bradley's expression showed he had no idea what quantum computing threats even meant. Marcus Chen finally found his voice, probably realizing that his client was digging a deeper hole with every word. Perhaps we should focus on transition planning rather than technical implementation details. But Robert Hartman was still in full panic mode, making increasingly desperate offers. Joy, what would it take to reconsider this decision? We could restructure your role, increase your authority, provide additional resources for your projects. I appreciated the irony. 3 hours ago, I was replaceable. Now I was indispensable enough to warrant complete organizational restructuring. Robert, I said, maintaining my professional tone, I've already committed to CyberGuard Industries. The transition is legally finalized. That's when Bradley made his most catastrophic mistake yet. Fine, he snapped, his MBA arrogance finally overriding his minimal survival instincts. If Joy wants to leave, that's her choice. But let's be realistic about what she's actually contributed here. The cybersecurity infrastructure was a team effort, and we have comprehensive documentation of all critical systems. I felt a cold smile cross my face. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Bradley, could you please describe how the quantum encryption key exchange protocol handles elliptic curve parameter validation? Silence. Or perhaps you could explain the emergency decryption procedures for classified data recovery. More silence. Maybe you could walk Dr. Williams through the security audit protocols that ensure system integrity during federal compliance reviews. Bradley's face went through several color changes as he realized he couldn't answer any of these questions. Worse, he was beginning to understand that these weren't obscure technical trivia. They were fundamental operational procedures that someone would need to know to maintain our government systems. Dr. Williams stepped into the silence with surgical precision. Robert, I'm concerned about knowledge transfer procedures. Our security protocols require documented handoff processes when key personnel change roles. Marcus Chen was now typing furiously, probably researching emergency contract modification procedures. Robert looked like he was contemplating cardiac medication, and Bradley finally began to grasp the magnitude of what he'd unleashed. Joy, he said, his voice suddenly much smaller. Maybe we should discuss the technical transition process more carefully. I looked directly into the camera, meeting his gaze one final time. Bradley, you declared me replaceable. I'm simply providing you the opportunity to prove that assessment correct." The video call had devolved into barely controlled chaos. Federal officials were asking pointed questions about system continuity. Corporate executives were frantically calculating damage control options. Technical staff were realizing their jobs might depend on systems that only I fully understood. And through it all, I sat calmly with my resignation letter and security badge still visible in the camera frame, watching 3 years of systematic disrespect finally receive appropriate consequences. But we weren't finished yet. The real catastrophe was still unfolding, and Bradley's attempted solutions were about to make everything infinitely worse. The next 72 hours revealed the true scope of the disaster Bradley had created. What started as a personnel crisis rapidly escalated into a complete organizational meltdown that exposed every weakness in TechFlow's technical infrastructure and management structure. Dr. Williams ended our video call with ominous bureaucratic language about mandatory security protocol reviews and immediate assessment procedures. In government speak, this meant TechFlow was about to undergo the kind of intensive audit that could destroy their federal contracting status entirely. I honored my professional obligations during those first 3 days, but I was legally prohibited from participating in any knowledge transfer activities that might benefit CyberGuard Industries. This meant I could answer direct questions about immediate operational needs, but I couldn't provide comprehensive documentation or training that would enable TechFlow to continue my work long-term. The restriction created an impossible situation for Robert Hartman. He desperately needed me to train replacement architects, but any detailed knowledge transfer would potentially violate my new employer's interests. Federal regulations required that I avoid conflicts of interest, which meant limiting my assistance to basic operational continuity, rather than comprehensive system education. Bradley, still convinced that confident leadership could overcome technical complexity, appointed himself as interim technical director while they searched for my replacement. His first decision was to bring in his business school study group as emergency consultants to assess our cybersecurity infrastructure. The results were predictably catastrophic. These consultants, armed with business degrees but zero cybersecurity experience, spent 2 days examining our systems and produced a 50-page report recommending fundamental changes to our security architecture. They suggested migrating our classified government data to cloud-based platforms for improved scalability and cost efficiency. They proposed replacing my custom encryption algorithms with commercially available software that would be easier to maintain and upgrade. Most dangerously, they recommended eliminating what they called unnecessary complexity in our security protocols to streamline operations and reduce technical debt. Every single recommendation would have violated federal security requirements and potentially compromised national security. When Dr. Williams received a copy of this report as part of the mandatory review process, her response was swift and devastating. She immediately escalated the situation to her superiors at the Department of Defense, triggering emergency security protocols that suspended TechFlow's access to classified systems pending a complete investigation. The suspension notice arrived on Thursday morning, 48 hours after my resignation call. It was a formal document outlining serious concerns about technical leadership continuity, security protocol compliance, and organizational competency in cybersecurity management. Robert Hartman called an emergency all-hands meeting to address what he described as temporary administrative challenges. The staff gathered in our main conference room, and I could see the fear in their faces as they began to understand how precarious their positions had become. "We're experiencing some transitional difficulties," Robert announced, his voice strained but attempting confidence. "Dr. Williams has requested additional documentation about our security procedures, and we're working closely with federal officials to address their concerns." Bradley stood beside his father, nodding as though he was providing crucial support during a minor bureaucratic inconvenience. He had no idea that federal security suspensions could take months to resolve and often resulted in permanent exclusion from government contracting. One of our senior developers, Amanda Walsh, raised her hand with obvious concern. Robert, what does this mean for our current projects? Are we still working on the contract renewal? Robert's hesitation before answering told everyone what they needed to know. We're exploring all available options to maintain our project commitments. Translation: the $25 million contract renewal was dead, and they had no idea how to salvage it. That afternoon, TechFlow's headhunting firm began reaching out to replacement candidates for my position. They quickly discovered that finding a qualified cybersecurity architect with appropriate federal clearances would take months, not weeks. The few candidates with relevant experience were either already employed in critical roles or unwilling to join a company under federal investigation. More critically, any replacement would need extensive time to understand our unique systems before they could take responsibility for maintaining classified government data. The learning curve for my quantum encryption implementations was measured in months, not days. Bradley's solution was typically tone-deaf. He suggested they could fast-track the transition by hiring multiple junior architects who could collaborate to replace Joy's individual contributions. He apparently believed that cybersecurity expertise was like manual labor, where multiple inexperienced workers could substitute for one skilled professional. Marcus Chen, increasingly desperate, tried to explain the legal impossibilities of Bradley's approach. You can't just divide security clearances among multiple people. Federal protocols require specific individuals to take personal responsibility for classified systems. Bradley's response revealed the depth of his misunderstanding. Marcus, we need to think creatively about solutions rather than getting bogged down in bureaucratic details. Bureaucratic details. He was describing federal security law as bureaucratic details. Meanwhile, CyberGuard Industries was moving with impressive efficiency to capitalize on TechFlow's collapse. David Park had already reached out to Dr. Williams and Colonel Thompson to discuss potential collaboration on upcoming projects. He was careful to avoid any appearance of improper solicitation, but he made sure federal officials knew that my expertise would be available through CyberGuard for future cybersecurity initiatives. The response was enthusiastic. Dr. Williams indicated that the Department of Defense would be very interested in exploring partnerships with organizations that demonstrated proven cybersecurity capabilities. Colonel Thompson mentioned several upcoming projects that would require exactly the kind of specialized expertise I'd been developing. By Friday, industry publications were reporting that TechFlow Solutions was under federal investigation for security protocol violations. The articles didn't provide details, but they created enough uncertainty to damage TechFlow's reputation with potential commercial clients as well. Robert Hartman's weekend was spent in emergency meetings with crisis management consultants, trying to develop strategies for salvaging his company's federal relationships. But the fundamental problem remained unsolvable. They had lost the technical expertise that made them competitive for government contracts. Bradley, finally beginning to grasp the scope of the catastrophe, approached me directly on Monday morning. His arrogance had been replaced by something approaching panic, and his voice carried a pleading quality I'd never heard before. "Joy," he said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot here. Maybe we can find a way to work together that addresses everyone's concerns." I looked at him with professional detachment. "Bradley, you declared me replaceable in front of our federal clients. I'm simply allowing you to prove that assessment." His face flushed with embarrassment. That was a poor choice of words. I was trying to project confidence during a challenging presentation. "And how is that confidence working out for you?" He couldn't answer. That afternoon brought the final blow. Dr. Williams officially notified TechFlow that the Department of Defense was suspending all current contracts pending resolution of the security review. The $25 million renewal was canceled, and future bidding opportunities would depend on TechFlow's ability to demonstrate technical competency and organizational stability. The notification was copied to 17 federal agencies, effectively blacklisting TechFlow from government cybersecurity work until further notice. Robert Hartman's empire, built on 3 years of my innovations and federal relationships, was collapsing in real time, and Bradley's confident assertions about replaceability were being tested against the harsh realities of cybersecurity expertise and government bureaucracy. The test was failing spectacularly, but the real reckoning was just beginning. TechFlow's commercial clients were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about their technical capabilities and federal standing. Employee resignations were accelerating as staff members recognized the company's precarious position, and CyberGuard Industries was preparing to announce several major contract victories that would establish them as the new leader in government cybersecurity. Justice was being served with mathematical precision. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new corner office at CyberGuard Industries, overlooking the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. My team of 12 brilliant engineers is working on 3 major federal contracts worth $40 million combined projects that showcase the kind of innovation that's possible when technical expertise is valued over family connections. The transformation has been remarkable. David Park kept every promise he made during my recruitment, providing unlimited resources and complete autonomy for developing next-generation cybersecurity solutions. I've hired specialists from MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon, building a dream team that's already generating breakthrough research in quantum-resistant encryption protocols. Dr. Sarah Williams visited our facility last week to review our progress on the Department of Defense contract that TechFlow had lost. She was impressed with our technical capabilities and especially pleased with the collaborative approach my team brings to government partnerships. Joy, she said, during our project review meeting. This is the kind of innovation and professionalism that federal agencies need from their cybersecurity partners. You've created something truly exceptional here. The vindication felt sweeter than I'd anticipated, but it was tempered by genuine satisfaction in meaningful work. We're protecting critical infrastructure systems that keep millions of Americans safe, developing technologies that will secure government communications for decades to come, and training the next generation of cybersecurity experts who understand both technical excellence and ethical responsibility. Meanwhile, TechFlow Solutions has become a cautionary tale in our industry. The federal security suspension lasted 4 months and resulted in the permanent loss of their government contracting status. Without federal revenue, they couldn't sustain their expanded workforce and were forced to lay off 60% of their staff, including most of the talented engineers who had made their success possible. Robert Hartman attempted damage control by publicly apologizing for management oversights and communication failures. But the cybersecurity community is small and unforgiving. Word spread quickly about Bradley's technical incompetence and arrogant treatment of skilled professionals, making it nearly impossible for TechFlow to recruit qualified replacements. The company now survives by providing basic IT services to small businesses, a far cry from their former status as a cutting-edge government contractor. Robert's dreams of building a cybersecurity empire died with my resignation letter, and his plans for grooming Bradley as a successor proved to be the very strategy that destroyed everything they'd built. Bradley himself lasted exactly 6 weeks after my departure, before being quietly removed from his innovation director role. Robert finally acknowledged that his son's business school education hadn't prepared him for the technical realities of cybersecurity work, but the recognition came far too late to save their federal relationships. I heard through industry contacts that Bradley eventually took a position with a marketing firm in Denver, where his MBA skills are apparently better suited to the work environment. He's no longer involved in technical decisions or personnel management, which is probably better for everyone concerned. The most satisfying aspect of this transformation isn't the personal vindication, though. That certainly feels good after months of systematic disrespect. It's the broader demonstration that competence and integrity ultimately matter more than politics and privilege in fields that require genuine expertise. Several of my former TechFlow colleagues have joined me at CyberGuard, bringing their talents to an organization that values their contributions and provides opportunities for professional growth. Lisa Chen is now my lead encryption specialist, working on algorithms that push the boundaries of what's possible in post-quantum cryptography. James Rodriguez heads our network security division, implementing protection systems for critical infrastructure that could revolutionize how we defend against sophisticated cyber attacks. These brilliant professionals are thriving in an environment where their expertise is recognized and their innovations are supported rather than undermined by incompetent management. They're proof that talented people will always find ways to contribute meaningfully when given appropriate opportunities and respect. The cybersecurity industry has taken notice of our success at CyberGuard. We've been invited to present our research at major conferences, our papers are being published in prestigious technical journals, and our innovations are being studied by researchers at universities around the world. The work we're doing here will influence cybersecurity practices for years to come. More importantly, we're training young engineers who understand that technical excellence must be combined with ethical leadership and respect for colleagues. The next generation of cybersecurity professionals will be better prepared to resist the kind of toxic management that nearly destroyed my career at TechFlow. The life lesson from this experience goes far beyond workplace politics or corporate maneuvering. It's about the fundamental importance of respecting expertise and treating people with basic human dignity regardless of their position in organizational hierarchies. Bradley's mistake wasn't just declaring me replaceable. His deeper error was believing that confidence and family connections could substitute for genuine competence and earned respect. He thought he could dismiss years of specialized knowledge and professional relationships through sheer arrogance and political maneuvering. The cybersecurity field, like many technical disciplines, has an unforgiving way of testing such assumptions against reality. When you're protecting national security systems or critical infrastructure, good intentions and confident assertions aren't sufficient. You need proven expertise, mathematical precision, and hard-earned trust from clients who stake their most important assets on your capabilities. Robert Hartman's tragedy was allowing family loyalty to override business judgment and professional standards. His desire to prepare Bradley for leadership blinded him to his son's fundamental unsuitability for technical roles, and his willingness to tolerate disrespectful behavior created the toxic environment that drove away the very expertise his company depended upon. The broader lesson applies to any organization that depends on specialized knowledge and technical innovation. Talented professionals have options, and they will eventually find environments where their contributions are valued appropriately. Companies that prioritize politics over performance, privilege over competence, or arrogance over respect will discover that their most valuable assets are more portable than they realized. In my case, the transition from TechFlow to CyberGuard wasn't just a career change. It was a liberation from constraints that had been limiting my potential for meaningful contribution to cybersecurity advancement. The work I'm doing now, the team I'm leading, and the innovations we're developing represent what becomes possible when technical expertise is supported rather than undermined by organizational leadership. Every morning when I arrive at CyberGuard, I'm reminded that respect and competence create sustainable success, while arrogance and nepotism ultimately lead to self-destruction. Bradley's smirk and declaration of my replaceability now serve as a permanent reminder of the importance of treating skilled professionals with the dignity their expertise deserves. The $40 million in contracts we've secured represents more than business success. It's proof that genuine technical excellence supported by ethical leadership and collaborative teamwork will always triumph over corporate politics and inherited privilege. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't angry confrontation or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's simply allowing incompetent leadership to experience the natural consequences of their poor judgment while building something better elsewhere. That quiet resignation letter I held up during that video call wasn't just a career decision. It was a statement about professional dignity and the importance of working in environments that recognize genuine expertise rather than demanding submission to unqualified authority. 3 months later, justice has been served with mathematical precision, and I'm building the future of cybersecurity with colleagues who understand that technical excellence and mutual respect are the foundations of meaningful innovation. The work continues, and it's more rewarding than I ever imagined possible. Have you ever experienced a workplace situation where your expertise wasn't valued appropriately, and how did you handle it? I'd love to hear about times when standing up for professional dignity led to positive changes in your career. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more workplace stories about finding respect and success in challenging professional environments. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of valuing genuine expertise over corporate politics. Thank you for listening, and I hope your own professional journey leads you to environments where your talents are truly appreciated and your contributions make a meaningful difference in the world.